sometimes ignoring Microsoft is the right approach, and sometimes it's the worst possible approach. And that really can vary by the size of the account. Because if you're dealing with a small to mid-market organization, responsibility for that account may belong to someone who's looking at lots of different accounts at the same time. It's the larger accounts where the Microsoft team needs to have confidence. The sellers, no matter what, are somewhat coin operated. Whatever is on the scorecard, fiscal year to fiscal year to fiscal year, is what motivates them, which provides an opening.
Today, I'm learning from Chris McNulty, Head of Markets at Synozur Alliance, an advisory agency specializing in strategic transformation. For almost 10 years, Chris worked at Microsoft as a Senior Director of Product Marketing across a range of products including Microsoft 365, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Stream. Chris also held CTO roles at Dell and Quest Software. In today's episode, Chris delivers a masterclass in how to succeed as a Microsoft partner, whether you lead a systems integration or an independent software vendor practice. Our conversation covers a range of topics from understanding Microsoft's multifaceted structure and the significance of building relationships with Microsoft sellers. We cover the importance of maintaining product positioning and finding niche markets. Whether you're part of a global systems integrator or running your own business and looking to strengthen your Microsoft partnership, this episode is a goldmine of strategies and real-world advice. Chris, welcome to Practice Leading. I'm honored to have you on the show because for the first time, I get to find somebody who's been inside the beast, who's worked at Microsoft. I think you were there for nearly 10 years. And
that's right.
A unique perspective on the successful or the characteristics of successful Microsoft partners. Thanks for joining us.
It's great to be here, Neil. Thanks for giving me the chance to speak here. Yeah, I've had an interesting career. If you take it back, prior to Microsoft, I came from the channel. I've spent, as I think a lot of the audience has, a goodly chunk of my career working with Microsoft technologies. And so I was the practice lead at a boutique-sized system integrator on the East Coast prior to joining what at the time was Quest Software, and then Dell after the acquisition as general manager and CTO. That's also, by the way, that's where I got my MVP cred from all of those conferences and speaking and writing and blogging, but really led me to Microsoft. And I've spent the better part of the last 10 or so years as one of the senior directors of product marketing for our content management portfolio, which includes things like SharePoint and OneDrive and parts of Viva and Syntex and Copilot.
Right.
So kind of being able to look at the inbound and outbound side of how we build product, how we shape it and deliver it through all the different conduits. And so that's kind of been my role there. And now I am Chief Markets Officer at Synozur. We are a boutique consultancy. We focus on business strategy and design work. We don't do implementation. We don't do delivery. We don't do development. Of course, technology is a piece of it, but sometimes we're helping with things like marketing or things like top-line business strategy.
Okay. And are you coaching Microsoft partners and systems integrators today, or mostly end customers?
It's a mix. I would say it's actually been more of late ISVs who are trying to formulate a product idea and then know how to explain it in a way that a Microsoft customer cares. And also, what does Microsoft care about? And that's something that it's important to remember that Microsoft is a multifaceted beast. You said the belly of the beast before. And there's a lot of different audiences and different places to plug in. And you have to understand that it is multifaceted. Pick where you're going to connect. I can't tell you how many times at Microsoft. While I was at Microsoft, my buddy Ian Story in engineering and I set up what is now the Content AI Partner Programs. That is all of the content management partners and things with AI and about 350 different partners.
That's a big group.
Oh, it's quite a big group. And a lot of times newer partners would come to us and say, we have something wonderful. We would like you to tell the Microsoft field about it. Now, at Microsoft, the field, based on how you count it, is about 40,000 people. And
in how many geographies, right? That's
how many geographies, how many sectors, even if you're just going to focus on the M365/modern work pool, there's a lot of people in a lot of roles. And if you don't know these as a Microsoft partner, like study up on your acronyms, know the difference between the ATU and the STU, know that the MTC has become the MIH. But there's, within the world of TSPs and SSPs and PDMs and all, people have a lot of different roles. And with those roles, they have a lot of different stakeholdership. So first and foremost, there is no easy button to the Microsoft field. Internally at Microsoft, if you own a product and you want it to go out there and get successful, like my team and I, we are marketing internally to Microsoft sellers. And they're inundated. Like some of the emails that they get internally, like their weekly product update, there'll be 100, 200 links. And most of those don't get tended at all.
Yep. I never thought about that way of internally promoting a product to the fields group. That's fascinating a way of looking at it.
Well, it gets to the distinction between the STU and the ATU, or the specialist technology units and the account technology units. STUs are striped by technology and also by region and by industry. And so they have a particular patch. So people who are looking at productivity or teams, or I feel like everyone's looking at Copilot or Power or what have you.
Right.
And the account team belongs to, certainly for the middle to large Microsoft customers, they belong to one customer or a small group of customers. And they're there to try to police all the different folks who want to get in on a given account. Microsoft has hundreds, if not thousands, of separate products that customers can choose from. And so it's a lot for the field to tend. It's a lot even at the account level to know what to get in and what to place. So there's the easiest button that you have as a partner is to make that process easier for a Microsoft seller.
That's a fascinating way of looking at it. So today, Superware is an ISV with 20 people. We're building industry applications for an Australian sector called superannuation, which is private retirement accounts, right? There's $4 trillion in the sector, but there's only about 100 customers. 4 or 5 of them are enterprise accounts, and the rest are mid-market. Mm-hmm. And figuring out who's who in Microsoft Australia, I haven't cracked that one yet at all. And so we're just happily going straight to the customers, right? Trying to sell directly to them, kind of ignoring the Microsoft organization, and we will engage them when there's a great opportunity, and we won't just let them know. But I think we're missing a massive trick there by not understanding who's who and what their pressures are and the challenges and their goals and their targets, and playing a lot easier with them, better with them.
Yeah, sometimes ignoring Microsoft is the right approach, and sometimes it's the worst possible approach. And that really can vary by the size of the account. Because if you're dealing with a small to mid-market organization, responsibility for that account maybe belong to someone who's looking at lots of different accounts at the same time. Yeah. It's the larger accounts where the Microsoft team needs to have confidence. The sellers, no matter what, are somewhat coin operated. Whatever is on the scorecard, fiscal year to fiscal year to fiscal year, is what motivates them. Which provides an opening, if you know a Microsoft seller, is to ask them what's on their scorecard. Because the top line items are fairly obvious year over year. It was Teams at one point, then it's E3 and E5. And, currently for modern work sellers, there's a blend of Copilot, and some E3 and E5 mixed in. If they're on the data plat or the AI side, they're looking for Azure consumed revenue or Mac, or how does that stuff get burned down? Understanding that dynamic for Microsoft sellers shows actually that you care and that you're thinking about how you can help them get to their numbers without injecting a whole bunch of deal friction. Because frankly, if you're a Microsoft seller, if you say you're going to do a Copilot deal, it doesn't matter on the face of it if there's an ISV who has an amazing Copilot add-in why do I want to talk to the customer about that? Because it might be I don't know them. It might slow things down. So let's just keep it out. And let's just tell the customer, Microsoft and Microsoft alone can solve your problem. Now, you know that is not always true. In fact, Microsoft internally recognizes, I was part of a lot of these discussions at Microsoft, that our customer base is too big and too diverse and too verticalized for Microsoft to actually be able to go and connect value in for customers in that way. So partners are such an essential part of that chain, but you need to be able to present that message in a way that's complementary to what Microsoft is doing. You can't shred what Microsoft is doing, and you can't ignore it.
Yeah, okay. There are a couple of Microsoft sellers who do work pretty closely with in other sectors. And it's great when we have frank conversations about why they would want to work with us. And it's, we've done great project work in their customer organizations before. They trust us. We've got a good track record. They're happy to introduce us into other customers in the same sector. So building up that track record of successful delivery, because I imagine like the example you gave, if you've got an ISV with an unknown track record, that may have a great add-in for Copilot, and it's going to help you retire lots of quota. Fantastic, but they have no reputation, and that represents a massive risk, right? So you have to really work hard to establish that credibility and show some success and case studies and some good customer references so that you can satisfy that the sellers that you're not going to stuff it up and drag it out and slow things down.
Right. It was said back in the day when Microsoft used to have gold and silver, is every year the cost of gold goes up. And so to stay in good stead with Microsoft is hard. If you're a smaller firm, like Synozur is, or your size, or, one of the most coveted things to keep achieving the right status is DPOR, being listed as partner of record. Yeah. And it's a really blunt instrument. It doesn't matter if you've got the most impactful solution for the finance group at one of your superannuation large clients, odds are really good Accenture owns the overall Microsoft relationship, or whoever, some very large SI or license reseller is going to be in first pole position for that. So that can be a disadvantage for some of those ways that you kind of pursue those Microsoft things and designations. But don't lose hope. There are lots of Microsoft programs, and fundamentally, the average customer isn't paying super close attention to the finest details of how many certifications and charters and designations and solution specialties do you have. The fact that you have some Microsoft logos, and the people at Microsoft would say, yes, Neil is a trusted partner. That's a good place for you to be. Yeah,
I completely agree. I still get customer, particularly RFPs, asking, are you a Microsoft Gold certified partner? It's like, that certification hasn't existed for a couple of years. Customers still think about it and ask about it. Those partner levels were rebadged a little while ago and renamed, and I don't think the market's quite caught up to that yet. Yeah. But yeah, like you said, there's a great place for people who don't have all the highest levels of certification. One of the things I would argue, for example, is we're not pursuing a business applications solution designation, because to do that, we'd have to sell a lot of licenses. And the folks who sell a lot of licenses are motivated to sell a lot of licenses, and we like to retain a little bit of independence and say, look, you can buy this product, and we built that on the Power Platform. This one built on Dynamics 365. We don't care which one. Right. But if I was motivated by selling licenses, I'd nudge you towards the Dynamics one, because it's a lot more, there's a lot more revenue associated with that.
Right.
And a lot more margin. So sometimes having a solution designation shows that you're great at selling licenses.
Yeah.
But, that's not always what a customer needs.
It's funny. There's a travel writer. I'm not sure if he's as popular down under as he is up here. He's called the Points Guy. I forget his name.
Oh yeah,
and talks about
this is loyalty points.
Yeah, he was in the New York Times this weekend. He was talking about how he has gotten out of all of his airline elite status because he's like, it's a shackle. He's like, I can get the points to get to first class however I want, but I want to be able to have the freedom to choose the best route to get where I need to go, and not just say, I'm going to change planes in Dallas because that's my preferred airline, even though it takes me 8 hours longer to get there. And I think actually the same thing is true for how you compose your own go-to-market as a partner. Like you're in the Microsoft ecosystem, right? So you're going to be Microsoft friendly. But you need to have just enough autonomy that you can bring the best solution forward, that you know how, when you're dealing with your clients, how to have that trusted advisor relationship, how to be a tiny bit skeptical, so that you are going to get listened to. Because in fact, that is another one of those things that Microsoft needs. During my years at Microsoft delivering modern work EBCs, it doesn't matter how open I was and trying to be objective about things. I'm there with a Microsoft badge and everything is presumed to be one-sided and slanted. And there's some intrinsic bias if you're at Microsoft and doing that. But knowing that like the account team could bring a certain partner in to do an evaluation or to help get something unblocked, and getting that trust relationship so that Microsoft will know, for the most part, they're going to do things that are going to be positive for what Microsoft cares about. They might have a difference of opinion here and there about like, whether or not it's possible to coexist with a Salesforce in an account. The answer is yes. Of course it is. And Microsoft is going to want to put every one of its products into every account. I'm a shareholder. I'm glad that continues. But
happy with that.
Being able to have the balancing act, and in fact, it's tougher for ISVs than for SIs. Because Microsoft doesn't really do systems integration. MCS used to, and now the Industry Solutions Group, there's some delivery capability, but it's not a primary motion there. Microsoft is really trying to drive consumption or drive seats. The ISV place is something that if you're looking at that, you need to really sit down with your marketing team and make sure that you do understand your messaging and positioning relative to Microsoft and that you're consistent with it. I can tell you that it does get looked at when a partner is coming in with a part of an account team and saying, yes, we're happy to do this. We're happy to get ESIF and help unblock this. And we love Microsoft. Someone will point out a page on their website, which at the same time is saying, Microsoft will never do this, can't be trusted, blah, 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 blah. That dichotomy can be toxic to having Microsoft endorse you into these accounts.
Yeah. We're just actually going through a website refresh at the moment, and I've got 6 co-founders. I've got a lot of opinions about what our website should look like. And one of the sessions that we went through was looking around at some of the more successful Microsoft partners here in Australia. Most of them are systems integrators. We do a lot of SI work, but we're trying to be an ISV first.
Right.
So we're looking at some of these websites, and they lean on Microsoft very heavily. Like there's a lot of product logos on the hero section of the first page. Very obvious that their first reason to exist is being a Microsoft partner. Whereas we're saying, look, we've built great industry applications that happen to be on the Microsoft stack, so they're very trustworthy and available and secure and well-governed. But we're trying to put our products in that hero position rather than the Microsoft logos. It's an interesting way to move forward, and how Microsoft-centric should our marketing message be. We've decided it's a secondary or tertiary quality for what we're trying to present on the website.
It's a sales philosophy that sometimes gets described as sell with, but it's really like sell on top of. You're not trying to displace. And it goes back to understanding the folks that you're engaged with at Microsoft, like, what are they metriced on? And you have to sort of choose those connection points. And some of it's personal. Some of it is geographic. One of the things I try to coach a lot of partners to understand are some of those different field roles. And historically, the MTCs, Microsoft Technology Centers, now referred to as Microsoft Innovation Hubs, they can be a more convenient way to get engaged with Microsoft because it's in a fixed geography. Yep. There's 43 of them around the world. They tend to have, there's a lot that's homogeneous across them, but they tend to have specialties. But keep in mind, their job is their solution architects are there to come in and have customers do 2 hours, 4 hours, a day or two of envisioning. The days of those innovation hubs or technology centers, they used to be hardware labs, if you go back 20 years ago.
That's right.
Because people would want to bring in I want to run an Oracle database on this thing from this DEC Alpha chip and test this all out with this storage network. And a lot of that is subsumed by the cloud. So that's a place where, frankly, a lot of those solution architects can look at really complex integrations because, frankly, the Microsoft field, despite all of Microsoft's wealth, if for instance, I don't mean to pick on Salesforce, but like their reality out there, a Microsoft seller to do a demo of a PowerPlat integration with Salesforce, well, Microsoft is not going to go buy 40,000 licenses of Salesforce to show that. But there's probably a technology center or innovation hub somewhere in the world that has that in a way that they can do those more deep integration dives. Those folks live in one place and they've got a parade of people coming past them. And like, if you take that approach, what you're hoping for is what I like to refer to as the doctor doorknob question. You go see your doctor, your physical, they check this, they check that, they talk about this, they talk about that. And it's like on the way out the door is wrapping up, invariably, it's like, have you ever tried reducing salt or this medication? Or, I think you actually might want to go talk to a specialist. It's that like on the way out the door almost thing. You want to be top of mind because the Microsoft architects, any Microsoft seller, they're in the back of their head cataloging how can they help get the customer where the customer needs to go in a way that's good for Microsoft. And so, there's an evolution. Like, if you're at Contoso Consultants, your first year doing this, no one at Microsoft's going to know who you are. Hopefully by after the first 1 or 2 years, you're going to be on a short list of Microsoft saying, you could talk to these people, you could talk to those people, you could talk to those people. And after you do that, occasionally you're going to get the calls directly from Microsoft, like, hey, we're stuck.
Yep.
Back in my pre-Microsoft days, we used to call this paying the Microsoft tax, right? So we're in the Northeast, and there'd be accounts that Microsoft we're not as geographically interested in servicing because it's winter and it's like, it's in upstate New York.
Cold.
And you need to do a certain number of those. Hey, we'll go in and talk to them, even though we might not make anything on the initial conversation because it's a two-way street. It can't just be that you're bringing, Microsoft can't just bring revenue to you. You're trying to bring revenue into Microsoft. And, understand that partnerships are always two ways.
Yeah, I've definitely agreed. We've gone to lots of industry conferences that Microsoft will never go to. So
right.
We're trying to introduce a Microsoft-based solution into these industries through our ISV product. And we're not expecting Microsoft to ever have a stand, to support our stand, to turn up. Occasionally we'll see maybe another Microsoft partner, maybe a Salesforce partner, something turn up. But we're definitely flying under that radar, reaching places where Microsoft itself can't get, either because the accounts are too small or the sector is too niche or whatever it is. But recognizing there's a spot for us there, and it's our job to bring Microsoft in rather than, I hear a lot of partners, Microsoft never bring us any leads. Well, nobody really got rich waiting for Microsoft to bring them leads.
Right. You can just keep hitting refresh and Partner Center all day if you want.
Yeah. So going through the Innovation Hub, that's an interesting idea because we're getting a lot of questions now about contact center. And those are very heterogeneous environments, lots of different hardware, telephone solutions that I can't easily demonstrate without a physical space. So the Innovation Hub would be a great place to do that in.
At the end of the day, everyone at Microsoft knows there is no such thing as a 100% Microsoft shop. Even Microsoft is not a 100% Microsoft shop. Not every device is a Surface. Not every piece of software was built in Redmond. And if that's true for Microsoft, it's true for Microsoft's customers. Yeah. So being able to kind of speak with a little bit more latitude to look left and right and be able to build that trusted guidance that this approach is going to work equally well for let's say you've just gone through a merger. Like, we can wire this so that we can bring data in from both Dynamics and Salesforce.
Right.
And so you can coexist with those.
Yeah.
Because, Microsoft is going to want it all to go to Dynamics, but they don't want it all to go to Salesforce. So coexistence is another place. We're talking about how Microsoft looks internally. The other thing that I think, may not be as commonly understood is there are lots of different partner programs, and it matters a lot to whether that program is being driven by the MCAPS organization, by partner marketing, or by the product teams.
Oh, tell me more about this. MCAPS was the first one you mentioned. I've never heard of that before.
Microsoft Customer and Partner Solutions. That's the internal acronym for the sales team, and especially sales structure and sales management. What people would think of as the field. Again, I said there's going to be lots of acronyms, so keep your pencils sharp.
I'm going to explain all these in the show notes someday.
Yeah. And sort of in the classic case, if you're a start out SI, you're not going to be a managed partner. You're not going to have a solution designation. If you have anything, you're going to be getting a newsletter reminding you that, there's a 2% spiff on Azure consumption that you drive by March 31st or something like that. And you can progress through those more sales-oriented things, but that's never a place where you're going to get engagement into the product teams or into the marketing teams. If you were to kind of keep going and growing in through solution designation, eventually rising to managed partner, you'll be at a position where those Microsoft people, if you're running into a thorny technical issue, could bring you in touch with the product teams. But that's pretty rare. Sales is sales. The second group, and frankly, the partner program that I ran at Microsoft are product team led. So this is starting with engineering and product management. Right. And, the way that we ran things, it didn't matter very much whether you were 500,000 people or 5 people. If you were in the program, you're in the program, and you get that level of engagement. And those programs, if you're in one, well, it's a little bit like a business-focused version of the MVP program.
Right. There's a lot of similarities there with what I recognize in the MVP program.
Except it's, present company excluded, having been on both sides of the MVP equation, there are sometimes folks who are MVPs who incredibly well penetrated and can be really thoughtful about their feedback and their guidance and their suggestions. And that's the vast majority of them. There's always a couple of naysayers who just want to sit back and say, you're doing it wrong. I would make a different decision. And that perspective, it's not constructive, and it usually gets seen by Microsoft with words like, that's great feedback.
But take a note of that.
Being in an MVP program is not entirely up to you. Microsoft has to select you, but you can be a Microsoft partner. And in doing that, be friendly. First and foremost, don't substitute your judgment for Microsoft's. Make sure that if there's something that Microsoft is doing that is having a negative impact or a positive impact, acknowledge it. Put it in customer terms of when this happens, customers can't do that, but that is unblocking these. That kind of learning, that product market fit stuff, is essential to making those parts of those relationship move. So that's top level. That's usually Redmond driven more than anything else.
Right.
And somewhere in the middle are partner marketing groups. These are most commonly engaged at products that are getting big, but not completely mainstream. So something, programs for things like, historically Teams Phone or some of the Power Plat programs, or being able to bring in outside consultants to deliver some of those app in a day workshops that was fairly common. And so that's sitting somewhere. It's not a selling role. It's not a product role, but folks who are in partner marketing can also help unblock marketing needs. Understanding what people can do. Salespeople can help with dollars. product-based programs can help with access, and marketing programs can help with visibility. And so you have to sort of choose that engagement.
Yeah, good. Well, that's a really good way of thinking about it. So I'd say today we're not strong in any of those. So that's given me some food to think about.
Sure.
I was going to ask you about developing product with Microsoft and the temptation to try and fill the white space, right? There's a gap there that we can address with our application. The Microsoft landscape has got an opportunity there for us. We can fill it. What are the risks of ISVs always trying to fill white space that Microsoft later comes in and fills with its own product? There always seems to be a risk of just trying to skate a little bit ahead of Microsoft, but they're coming right behind you. So the opportunity is very short-lived.
Longtime Microsoft partner Dave Marcus, who used to be in charge of alliances at K2, had an expression that's sort of gone out in the ether. It says, being a Microsoft ISV partner is sort of like picking up quarters in front of a steamroller. Eventually it's going to get there. And so your job is to get as much as you can and be nimble enough to keep moving down the road, because it's a steamroller, but it's not moving that quickly, which I thought was a helpful analogy. Microsoft is not looking to put partners out of business. I remember years ago when I was with that SI in Boston, there was a very small software group, about 5 people, who had a charting add-in for PowerPoint. I remember, there was a question like, is Microsoft watching this? Are they gonna try to put us out of business? And I'm like, and my answer was always, they might, but it won't be intentional. It would be accidental. That Microsoft does not wake up in the morning looking for white space to fill. And in fact, knowing that white space is going to be filled gives Microsoft more investment clarity at doubling down on the areas that need that level of attention. A great example of that is the way Microsoft has approached things like electronic signature. It's a smaller product. It's one of the ones that I help champion at Microsoft. So now SharePoint e-signature is a decent utility. You can sign a document and send it to someone back and forth. I don't think there's ever going to be, it's not inside information, but for all the things Microsoft could pay attention to, building up one of these solution spaces to contend with or surpass the capabilities of a DocuSign or an Adobe Sign.
Yeah.
Or to let a contract management accelerator get on top of an iCertis. Microsoft could do that if they wanted to. But the fact that there's partners who have Microsoft-friendly solutions in there makes that just much less likely.
Okay. I hadn't thought about it that way. So a good, strong ISV filling a Microsoft customer need is sometimes good enough. Microsoft's got plenty of other priorities to...
Because those complex scenarios, those industry verticals, those are things that Microsoft just doesn't do as well.
Right. One thing that struck me when I had a customer challenge with an Adobe integration. Mm-hmm. So Satya, and I can't remember the name of the Adobe CEO, had been on stage, strategic partnership, lots of hugs and press releases. At a product level, the integrations weren't great. And this customer had a real challenge. The integration was working in a very, very strange way between Adobe Campaign and Microsoft Dynamics. I introduced a GM from the ISV and the Dynamics team who was responsible for that Adobe integration, and she had no idea it worked this way. Adobe had gone and built it without really consulting anybody at Microsoft in engineering, and she was fascinated to find out that the customer had this challenge. And I couldn't really believe that a lot of people at Microsoft, particularly in engineering, don't get to meet customers very often.
No.
They don't have an opportunity to go out and visit on site and spend a lot of time in workshops with customers. A lot of it's done either in Redmond or whatever the developer center is for that product, with lots of feedback from the field, from MVPs, from customers and partners. But the opportunity they have to go and speak to customers and listen to their challenges is quite rare. And
Great.
Would you agree that there's an opportunity there for partners to introduce engineering into those customers to give them that insight and help solve those challenges together?
Absolutely. And if you're a partner, you should be thinking about doing that in sort of 2 tranches. One is feedback by proxy, right? We have heard from our customers A, B, and C. And A, B, and C can't all be terrible. A should be good and B and C should be growth areas. Great. And then based on how that's going, it is fair and reasonable to say, would you, engineering person, I can arrange a conversation with this customer if you would like. That, again, there's a little nuance to it. Like, don't marry up a, Microsoft corporate vice president with someone on the help desk.
Right.
I've seen some of those meetings happen at conferences, and it's just sort of like, it's not that it's bad. It's just like there's no connection in the whole arena. So you want to make sure that you're bringing, in the example you mentioned, let's say you want to speak to someone who is a principal product manager or a group product manager. Those are folks who manage people who are designing and managing product. And they're close enough to it to care that the person who's in charge of the integration, who's got their hands on the keys somewhat at your customer, those are good people to talk to.
Right.
Or if it's at an end user level, you can ask, well, would the design team like to get some UX feedback? Because the design teams always are loving chances to go conduct and do informal or even formal research directly with customers. So anything you can do that lends credence to that trust relationship. And especially with the product groups, it's, again, I'm going to draw the analogy to the MVP Summit. Being in the MVP program is an opportunity, but it's not a delivery. You get to come once a year to the Redmond campus and hear from a lot of product people and make relationships with them. What you do with those relationships in the year in between is up to you. And the same thing is true as a partner. Like as you're coming to, any of these high moments, whether it's at an Ignite or something else, like what you do with that, you're all getting an opportunity to interface with someone, like, sustain it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an opportunity to invest in a relationship throughout the year. So, yeah. One final question, Chris, as we wrap up. I've seen quite a few folks leave Microsoft, particularly those who were heavily involved in the partner channel, and set themselves up as consultants to help partners navigate and deal with the Microsoft partner bureaucracy, right? Establishing DPOR relationships and handling distribution and licensing and those kinds of things. Do you think that's a healthy sign of a vibrant ecosystem? Or is it just, has the whole thing got so complex that partners just can't navigate it themselves? They're going to have to hire a consultant to step in and do it for them?
Yeah, I think it's a sign of an overgrown ecosystem. In some ways, almost too healthy.
Right.
Right. That there's just too much going on that Microsoft's got just a data management problem. Microsoft is what? Even at the corporate level, 700,000, 2 million organizations who have significant M365 installations. Like,
wow.
How do you track that? Like, I'm pulling those numbers out of the air. But the reason why it's complex is because the product mix is complex, and Microsoft wants to make the usage simple and invests in having the user experience be simple, so the back end gets clunky and kludgy. And which is why if something is hard to measure, there might be block grants. That's part of why ESIF exists, right? If you're a partner who doesn't know what ECIF is, End Customer Investment Funds, that's something that you should be looking at, because those are funds that Microsoft can make available to help drive something like a pilot program to unblock a deal. And Microsoft has made it easier, by the way, for partners to get ESIF, because you no longer have to go through SSPA, Microsoft Supplier Security and Privacy Assurance Program, which was another set of obstacles. So some things are getting simpler, but there is always going to be some measure of complexity. Frankly, it's one of the things that, with our firm, we're looking more at the messaging and go-to-market strategy than the specific mechanics of getting into this program and that. And so there's a balance. By nature, we're strategy and design firms. So like getting into the mechanics of partner center renewals, it's great that there's specialists who are covering that.
Yeah. I hope that anybody who does need that strategy and design work, if they're emerging as an ISV or as a technology partner, that they reach out to you at Synozur and tap into your expertise. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining us on Practice Leading. It's been awesome to meet you and to learn some of your hints and tips.
For the audience, if you're coming to conferences, I'll be appearing at the M365 conference in May in Las Vegas, and also at the TechCon 365 event here in Seattle in June. You can find me at Synozur.com. That's Synozur. I know you'll put it in the show notes. You can also track me down on my personal website, chrismcnulty.net, and you'll find a lot more about things like photography and songwriting there, but you can still, it all comes to the same person. So
awesome. Well, I wish I had a chance to meet you at some of those conferences. I've made it, the Power Platform Community Conference is going back to Vegas this year for the third year.
Yep.
But Vegas is not my town.
It's busy.
It's not my kind of city. So I'll wait until maybe they rotate around some other city. In the meantime, I'll be there at MVP Summit, and hopefully folks who listen to this can catch you at the M365 conference and the Tech Conference later in the year.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for joining me today on Practice Leading. Chris will be at the M365 conference in Las Vegas this May and at the TechCon 365 event in Seattle in June. If you want to connect with Chris, you'll find links to those conferences and Chris's websites in the episode description. I have to admit that Superwire's relationship with Microsoft, it's kind of the most challenging aspect of our business. Whether it's dealing with the time-sucking bureaucracy of Microsoft Partner Center, or the frustration of trying to close multi-million-dollar deals before your Microsoft seller will ever return an email. As a business, we've got a lot to improve here. Chris has given me a vital reminder of what it takes to successfully grow in partnership with Microsoft, not just in spite of them. I heard similar stories from lots of my peers at MVP Summit this March, so clearly it's something I need to prioritize. My key takeaways from today's conversation with Chris were understanding the Microsoft field. Microsoft's this huge organization with a lot of business units and different roles. Successful partners know how to navigate Microsoft. They reach the people that share their goals and they work alongside them. The role of ISVs, independent software vendors, play a vital role in the Microsoft ecosystem. In some product areas like ERP, business applications, there's a thriving ISV community. Chris reminded me of the importance of finding the white space and complementing Microsoft's offerings instead of trying to compete. And Microsoft Innovation Hubs. Microsoft has made significant investments in things like their executive briefing centers and innovation hubs all over the world. Successful partners know they discover how to use these facilities to their advantage to help their customers envision and evaluate their offerings. If you've got one of those facilities near you, find out how to use it. You can leave a comment on YouTube or the Practice Leading company page on LinkedIn and let me know what you learned from Chris today. I hope you enjoyed this Practice Leading episode and found it just as inspiring as I did. Remember to subscribe to the Practice Leading newsletter. You'll get a summary of the key takeaways from each episode and invitations to live events with our guests every couple of weeks. Visit practiceleading.com and enter your first name and email on the homepage. That's all there is to it. Until next time, keep experimenting